Welcome to Taking It to the Streets. I'm your host, Andy Goldman from sunny St. Pete, Florida. This is the show where we take it to the streets, knowing if we don't, the streets will take it to us. Welcome to Taking It to the Streets. It's Andy Goldman. This is the show that is brought to you, of course, by Rightwood Medical, www.rightwoodmedical.com. And they can also be reached directly, 773-848-7100. They are your leader. They buy back your old medical equipment, your surplus, and away we go into a wonderful guest that we've got joining us today. We always bring you somebody of note here at Taking It to the Streets. This guy needs no introduction. Gary Myers joins us today. Gary, of course, longtime columnist, NFL columnist for the Dallas Morning News, the New York Daily News. He's written 7 books, and this is just a thrill to have Gary on the show. So, Gary, thanks for making the time, and thanks for coming to the streets here.
My pleasure, Andy. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Before we delve into some specifics about your career, I got to ask you, I think we saw some incredible stuff this weekend on so many different levels on the football field. I want to start with getting your thoughts about Ohio State, Indiana. That sticks out in my brain. What did you make from your perspective from that? Has Ohio State been hiding the entire season, showing stats throughout the game where they've never not had the lead in the second half, as if that's congratulatory to Ohio State versus derogatory because they haven't played anybody? Where do you go with that?
Well, I mean, they did play Michigan the week before, and Michigan's, a top 20 team. You know what? As we sit here today, I still think Ohio State's going to win the championship. I think they're that much better than everybody else. Last year, they wound up losing to Michigan on that Saturday of Thanksgiving weekend, and they got on a roll to carry them right through to the national championship game, and they won the title. So maybe the wake-up call just came a week later this year, and they lose in the Big Ten championship game to Indiana. They might wind up playing Indiana again for the national championship. I just think they're the best team in the country, and it's hard to go undefeated no matter what level. And Indiana played a good game. They hit a key pass at the end of the game to keep a drive alive, keep the ball away. But whether they can do it again, I don't know. And I think Ohio State, I still think they're going to win the championship.
Parody or mediocrity as it relates to the NFL?
I think they kind of go hand in hand. Parody breeds mediocrity, or this is what the league wants for, 3/4 of the team the second week in December to still have a shot at making the playoffs. I'm old school. I liked it when there were 2 or 3 teams that you get to the point this year and you say, okay, one of those 3 is going to win the Super Bowl. And that's generally what would happen. Now it's just so wide open. It's good for the fans, who think their team that's a game or 2 over 500 at this point, it can go on and win the Super Bowl. But I just think the quality of play is really down over the last, 5 or 10 years.
I mean, what do you make of New Orleans? A dome team marching in with nothing to play for to Tampa in the rain. And Tampa's got everything to play for and beats them like a drum at Raymond James. I mean, what sense do you make of that?
Well, it was a relatively close game. And I just think the talent level on these teams is relatively close. And the difference is, do you have a quarterback you can win with? And do you have a coaching staff that can manage the last 2 minutes of a game? And, the Saints were not going to go, I don't even know what did they win 3 games so far? It's really hard to win only 3 games. It's probably harder to win 3, to only win 3 rather than to win 14. You got to be really, really bad to only win 3 games. And, if you get your quarterback gets on a little bit of a roll, and the other team takes you lightly and it's raining out the whole game and nobody wants to be there, I mean, things, games like yesterday could happen. And remember, Tampa, it wasn't like Tampa was blowing people out. Remember, they had a couple of games over 500, and they've been struggling lately. So, I was surprised, but I can't say I was shocked.
What did you think of the Bears in Green Bay?
Those are the games the Bears have been winning all season. one-score games that come down to the last minute or two. They've been pulling them out, so they were kind of due to lose that. I think Green Bay is, they just won back-to-back games against the Lions and the Bears, which is impressive. Those are two good teams. I think the Bears are probably about a year ahead of where most people anticipated they would be. Ben Johnson's done a real good job with Caleb Williams, who's still got some rough spots that he's got to take care of. But I think they've given the fans in Chicago a great season. And it's not over. I mean, they can still do some business in the playoffs.
But where do you fall with them, Green Bay, and Detroit, fighting it out down the wire in the last month? I mean, am I crazy that the Bears might not make the playoffs?
No, I think they'll make the playoffs. The Lions, I think, might be the most talented of those three teams, and they've just not had the kind of season that they had last year. I mean, all three of them can make the playoffs. I haven't really studied the standings really that closely today, but I know you got Seattle and the Rams, and only one team from the NFC East will make it. Obviously, likely be Philadelphia unless they just completely fall apart here. I still think Chicago's got a really good chance. I mean, they go from the number prior to this weekend, they were the first seed in the NFC, and now what are they down to? 6 or 7 or something, because there's so many good teams in the NFC.
Same thing they have with Pittsburgh and Baltimore. They swapped spots on that game yesterday as well.
Yeah, but those are two mediocre teams with very average records, where they were both 6-6 going into that game. I mean, somebody has to win that division. If Cincinnati hadn't lost Joe Burrow for 2 months, and if Cincinnati could play any bit of defense, they could have easily won that division. That's just there for the taking this year.
I'm with you. I'm from Chicago. I've had my heart broken by that Bears team so many years. So I'm so glad.
Well, they can't have your heart broken that many times recently. They haven't been good enough to break your heart.
I guess I never thought of it that way. They're really, if there are no expectations, then what's there to get your heart broken over?
That's right.
I'm with you. Okay, so Gary he's written 7 books, and he just recently wrote a book about Brady versus Belichick. It's the Dynasty Debate. 10 years before that, he wrote a book about Brady versus Manning. So let's start there. He's written other books. He wrote a book about the catch. How about them Cowboys? Spent a long time as a columnist in Dallas. He's written a book about the Coaching Confidential. So we'll touch on a few of these different topics, but I want to start, and we talked about this off camera a little bit. It obviously wasn't a sequel, Brady versus Manning, into Brady versus Belichick. Where did you fall Brady versus Manning, and for what reason?
Well, I definitely felt that, I think Tom's the best quarterback in NFL history. So I clearly think that he's clearly better than Manning. The head-to-head was 11-6. A little deceiving because the last 3 times they met in the playoffs, it was in the AFC Championship game, and Peyton won all 3 times. But overall, in their head-to-heads, it was kind of one-sided. And I think that just, if you look at the entirety of their careers, despite the fact that, Peyton had an outstanding career, probably one of the top 3 or 4, the fact that Brady got to 9 Super Bowls in New England and won 6, and then he goes to Tampa and he wins another, I think I think the argument really is Tom Brady versus Joe Montana in terms of who's the best quarterback in NFL history. But what I was doing in the Brady Manning book was you have 2 of the best quarterbacks playing side by side and facing each other so many times, which is very rare. Look how hard it is to find what could be the next Brady Manning rivalry. Is it Mahomes and Josh Allen? Well, they're not going to meet in the playoffs this year, most likely. We thought maybe it could be Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, or Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, but it really hasn't developed that way yet. I think you have to have 2 great quarterbacks who play each other just about every year to get a rivalry like that. And the fact that, Brady and Manning, dominated that era, I thought was a really interesting topic to explore.
Does Montana and Marino get on that list at all as qualifiers?
Well, I listen. I certainly think that Marino is one of the five best. He's definitely in my group of five. But whether it was his fault or Don Shula's fault, they didn't win a Super Bowl together. And Marino got to a Super Bowl once and he got blown out 38-16 by the 49ers in Super Bowl 19. And that was after Dan's second year in the league, and he never got back to Super Bowl. So I think that's a big hole in his resume. So I would not put him in that group with Brady and Montana. I mean, Montana was 4 for 4 in the Super Bowl and didn't throw an interception in any of the 4 games. I mean, and his numbers don't compare to Brady simply because there was a different era where running the ball still meant something and all the rule changes hadn't yet been made that favors the passing game. There's no doubt in my mind if Montana played in the same era as Brady and he had Jerry Rice and John Taylor as his receivers, that he would have thrown 50 touchdown passes in a season and thrown for 5,000 yards, because I think Brady and Montana really are the same player, just different eras.
Yeah. Yeah. Does Breeze get a vote in your brain at all, as far as, or do you just dismiss him because it was a fast track in New Orleans and a perfect system, and it's almost kind of he's not in that ilk?
Well, I kind of look at Drew Brees' career with Sean Payton as they underachieved. They were always at the top of the NFC, number 1 seed a bunch of times, and they just got to one Super Bowl and then they won it. But I thought there was more there for them to achieve together. I mean, Sean's a great coach. I have a ton of respect for Sean Payton, and Drew's a great player. But when you look back on it, they won one Super Bowl together, and there's a lot of coach-quarterback combinations that have done that. So that, to me, kind of eliminates Breeze from the conversation of the top of the elite class.
The more I think about it, there's really nothing like what Brady versus Manning. Because in my brain, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking of Favre versus Roethlisberger, and that's just such a light version of what you're talking about. I mean, that's a fleeting moment compared to Brady versus Manning, which
would be more like Favre versus Elway. That would be more contemporary. I mean, that would be more appropriate. I'm not sure how many times Favre won against Ben anyhow, but Favre and Elway met in the Super Bowl. It was a great game. John was in the league about 7 years before Brett. I mean, it was really Elway Marino was the side-by-side comparison, but the thing that blows people away is that Elway and Marino only faced each other 3 times in their careers, which is unbelievable. I mean, their careers went 16, 17 years, and they only faced each other 3 times because the formula they use for scheduling today is not the same as back then. And so when Manning and Brady were meeting every year, because they each finished in first place every year and those teams played each other, they didn't use that formula back when Elway was facing Marino. So it was only 3 times that they faced each other, and 2 of them came in Elway's last season, I believe. And so that was just kind of an anomaly there, where they just never, really won against each other.
Right. So we fast forward 10 years. We're now Brady versus Belichick, the Dynasty Debate. I'll go first. I as a just a passionate fan and an onlooker, not an insider like yourself, I hate when people say it's not even close, but to me, it's not even close. It's Brady on a lot of different levels. I'm not using even the offensive metrics. I'm just using the fact that he's a 6th round pick that's completely passed over in every single way. They took a defensive no-namer in the 6th round prior to taking him as the final pick in the 6th round. That's the first thing. So Belichick has no right to chest thump. We knew he was going to be great. No, you didn't. Then we start the season. Bledsoe's out there to take that hit from Mo Lewis. So the intention was that he was going to hold a clipboard like Chase Daniel or Mike Kafka for the lion's share of his career. He then becomes the greatest football player of all time. Now, I think you come at it from a different standpoint, that Belichick's a defensive guru. They don't win those first couple titles without the acumen of Belichick, but wow, I just think when you're out there playing, Gary, with that team, I don't know. I think it's Brady, but like I said, I'm interested to get where you're coming from on this argument.
Well, a couple things. Tom Brady might not have been drafted if Bill Belichick didn't take him. So, right or wrong, he was about to fall through the entire draft before Belichick took him. If Belichick thought he was going to be great, he wouldn't have waited until the sixth round, and he wouldn't have taken 6 players ahead of Brady in that draft. Now, all that being said, Belichick did see something in Brady in that first training camp that he thought he had a little something to him. And Tom is the first to say that, he owes the early portion of his career to Belichick because nobody knows what would have happened to him if Belichick didn't take him. Remember, they kept 4 quarterbacks in 2000, Tom's rookie year. No teams keep 4 quarterbacks. Now, the reason they did it is they had terrible salary cap problems and they needed some cheap labor, and it didn't come much cheaper than a 6th-round quarterback.
Right.
But he did see something in him that convinced him to take him, to keep him, not to try to sneak him through waivers to get him on the practice squad because he thought somebody might take him. So he kept him. Now, the part of the story that people don't know, and I really make a point of this in the book, is that going into the 2001 season, which was Brady's second year, Belichick wanted to start the season with Brady as the starting quarterback. I've got that from several sources. The problem was that Robert Kraft had signed Bledsoe to a 10-year, $103 million contract, the largest contract in NFL history at the time, in March of 2001, because he was building a new stadium with his own money, no PSLs, no public funds, and he was trying to show Patriot fans that there was stability in the organization, and Bledsoe was extremely popular. He was the franchise quarterback, so Kraft said, I'm going to make a commitment to Bledsoe to prove to the fans that we're going to have a stable franchise and we're going to win. Well, Belichick did not like Bledsoe. He didn't like him as a player. I don't know how he felt about him personally, but he was not a Bledsoe fan. He comes out of training camp in 2001. They're opening against Cincinnati. He wanted to start Brady in that game. Brady had a tremendous training camp in his second season. He had gained a bunch of weight in their off-season program. He got much bigger and stronger. But Belichick didn't feel he had the security to make a move like that because his boss had just signed Bledsoe to this huge contract. He'd been through that whole thing in Cleveland with Bernie Kosar, benching a local icon and eventually getting run out of town for it, just as the Browns were running out of town to go to Baltimore. So he didn't have it in him to go through that a second time and start Brady over Belichick. He couldn't imagine walking into Kraft's office and say, hey, by the way, the guy you just signed $100 million contract, he should be my backup to a guy you never heard of a year ago. He couldn't do that. So
why, but Gary, I'm sorry to interrupt. Gary, why not conversation before Kraft signs him to a $103 million deal?
He didn't want him to sign to that contract.
Oh, he voiced his view about that.
Yes. Yeah, I should have pointed that out.
So they did have the conversation before, and Bob went forward with it.
Right. Now, I don't know that he said at that point in March, I really want to start Brady, because he hadn't even been through the second training camp yet. It was after that camp that he became convinced that Brady was his guy. But because he couldn't talk Kraft out of that contract, he couldn't bench Bledsoe at that point. There's too many B's here. Brady, Belichick, Bledsoe. I keep mixing it up as I'm going. But yeah, so he couldn't go to Kraft.
I get it.
Right at that point, he tried to tell him in March, I'm not crazy about you doing this deal because I'm not sure he's my guy. And Kraft loved Bledsoe, not as much as he learned to love Brady, but he was a big Bledsoe guy. And so he went and signed that contract.
And why? It's not like Bledsoe was this Dan Marino, John Elway type of guy. I mean, if you're looking at Bledsoe's best days before the injury were at Washington State. They weren't.
Well, he did get to the Patriots to the Super Bowl in '96 with Parcells. I mean, and again, he was a good quarterback. He just wasn't as good as it turned out that Brady turned out to be. But you didn't look at the Patriots at that point and say, okay, they got Drew Bledsoe, they need another quarterback. That's, most people didn't feel that way.
So I get it. There was confluence of political will that occurred with regard to Belichick at Cleveland with Kosar. And then the second time was going to be at New England with Brady and Belichick. Now, where do you fall, though, Gary, on Brady versus Belichick, the great debate that you've put out there? Where do you fall on who was more accountable for the dynasty?
And I want to point out one other thing.
Okay.
So in the second game of that season, in 01, which was the first game after 9/11, that's how I always remember that game, was the first game after 9/11. But it's become known as the game where Bledsoe got hurt. And as much as Belichick wanted to play Brady, and they were that game, they lost to the Jets after losing to Cincinnati the week before, so they're 0-2. They're down 10-3 with about 4 minutes to go when Mo Lewis blasted Bledsoe. No coach, no matter how you feel about a player, ever wants to see a player get hurt. And especially what happened to Bledsoe. He nearly died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital.
Wow.
He was bleeding. He had a sheared blood vessel in his chest from that hit from Lewis. But I don't think that Belichick would dispute the point that the greatest thing that ever happened to him in his coaching career was Mo Lewis hitting Drew Bledsoe. Again, not that he wanted Bledsoe to get hurt, but it allowed him to do what he wanted to do, which was to play Tom Brady and not have anybody question it because he was the backup quarterback. And then he stood his ground 2 months later when Bledsoe was healthy and got medical clearance and expected to get his job back. And Belichick didn't do that because, Brady, I think, was 5-3 as the starter and they were winning, and he took a chance on dividing the locker room. But a lot of the players were loyal to Bledsoe, but they were more loyal to winning, and Tom was winning. The way I would break this down to answer your question is I think the early part of this is weighted heavily in favor of Belichick. He drafted him, he developed him, he kept him, and he had the courage to stick with him when Bledsoe was healthy, and that was a defensive-oriented team. Now, Tom went on that winning drive in that first Super Bowl against the Rams, and Belichick showed a lot of faith in him because if you remember that game, John Madden's on TV saying they're throwing 17-yard line, 2 minutes to go in a tie game, play for overtime, and Belichick didn't play for overtime, and Tom took him into position to get the field goal. But, I mean, that was an incredible offense that they held, I think it was to 17 points in that game. Mm-hmm. And they don't make it to the Super Bowl the next year, then they win again in Tom's third and fourth year as a starter. The second Super Bowl he wins against Carolina was a offensive game, so I give that one to Tom. The next one, they held Philadelphia to like 21 points. That was a really good team. I think that was probably 55 or 60% Belichick. But then from that point forward, I think that team was dominated by Tom Brady. And the turning point was in 2007 when he throws 50 touchdowns and they go undefeated. I think people at that point saying, okay, Tom is not only better than Peyton Manning and he's the best quarterback in the league, but he's really closing the gap on Joe Montana as the greatest ever. And I thought from that point forward, it was a team dominated by Brady over Belichick, except for that last Super Bowl against the Rams following the 18th season rather, when they beat the Rams again and they held them to 3 points. That was a Belichick-dominated game at least. But I would say from 2007 on, that was Tom Brady's team.
I agree. Why do we see this nepotism and this recirculation of coaches in the NFL? I know you wrote the book, The Coaching Confidential. I wanted to ask you about this. The nepotism of Shanahan, Schottenheimer, Callahan, that's just off the top of my head. The resurfacing of guys that, quite frankly, don't deserve a second chance at any level. Chip Kelly comes off my brain. Dennis Allen. I mean, why is Dennis Allen getting 4, 5, 6 jobs in the NFL? I mean, what era am I missing of a Dennis Allen-led dominant team on either side of the ball? And these are just off the top of my head. I mean, I can go on and on of guys that I truly consider bums that in our world, in the private sector, they're not getting 4, 5, 6 different shots to do their scheme or do this. So why is it different in the NFL with this buddy? It almost feels like Augusta. Like it's weird.
It feels like what? I'm sorry?
Augusta, like Augusta National. Got to know somebody to get in. Got to, the nepotism is very deep. I don't understand. I mean, why is Dennis Allen the defensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears?
Well, he's not a bad defensive coordinator. He's a bad head coach. Kyle Shanahan is not a product of nepotism. He's a really good coach. And it's not like he worked for his father in Washington, but he didn't get the head coaching job in San Francisco because his father is Mike Shanahan. So I disagree with you on that one. Brian Schottenheimer is not the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys because his father's Marty Schottenheimer. Jerry Jones had no allegiance to Marty Schottenheimer. He's going to hire his son as the head coach. Now, you can say, that assistant coaches continually get jobs for head coaches that they've had a long relationship with, but that's how it works in the coaching business. That coaches surround themselves with coaches they're familiar with that have, the same philosophies. So when a head coach switches jobs, and some of them have, 2 and 3 different jobs, they tend to surround themselves with many of the coaches they had in their previous stops. I mean, Parcells did that with the Jets and with the Patriots and with the Cowboys. Whatever guys were available from, his crew when he was with the Giants, he always tried to bring them with him because if he felt they were good coaches and they had a winning formula, then why wouldn't you do that?
Why
there are some coaches that there are some coaches who get hired by their brothers. Like, for example, Belichick's 2 sons worked for him in New England, and now they're both working for him, in Carolina. Now, Steve Belichick went to work in University of Washington in the year that his father was out of football. Maybe that was a favor to Jed Fish, who was a coach out there. Washington or Washington State, I can't remember.
It was Washington,
Washington. If Steve Belichick, if there's a clause in Bill Belichick's contract that his son succeeds him at North Carolina, then that's nepotism. It might even be nepotism to have him on his staff, but if he's a really good coach, then you can live with that. If he's a bad coach, and I'm not saying he is, I think he's probably a decent coach, then I don't find anything really wrong with it. But you have to remember that, these head coaches delegate a lot of responsibility, and they're not just going to pull somebody off the street who they're not familiar with and make them an offensive, defensive coordinator. They tend to rely on the people they're familiar with. The Chip Kelly thing is really interesting. Pete Carroll brings them in there. I don't know if Tom Brady had recommended that or how that worked out. Chip Kelly had a really close relationship with Ryan Day. That's how he wound up at Ohio State, because Day had actually worked for Chip Kelly with the Eagles and the 49ers. So he hired him at Ohio State. How he wound up with the Raiders, I'm not real sure what the connection there was. But Pete Carroll got rid of him after like a half a season, maybe a little more than half a season. So if you can't coach, you tend not to continue to get these jobs.
Gary, in today's world, am I crazy in saying the Ohio State offensive coordinator position is a higher level job than the the Vegas Raiders offensive coordinator position? It has more credibility. It has more clout. It has more prestige. Am I crazy in saying that? I mean, we're paying players now. There's an NIL system in place. I mean, isn't it more impressive to be out there coaching Ohio State than it is the Raiders?
Well, tell me what the difference in the salary is, and then I'll answer that question.
Well, it's massive. It's massive. I mean, the difference in salary for the coordinator for the players.
No, for the coordinator. Is Chip Kelly making more money with the Raiders?
That's a good question. I've got to believe he's making more money with the Raiders than he would with Ohio State. I'd have to, but I'm talking about the overall credibility in an NIL era. I would think that the Ohio State, the Bama, these types of juggernaut programs, uh, there's more credibility than the bottom feeder of the NFL. I don't know.
Well, I mean, with
Are we heading that way?
Ohio State gets great receivers every year, and they score a lot of points, and that is a good reflection on the offensive coordinator. But I tend to think that in college, you don't hear as much about the coordinators as you do in the NFL. I think in college, the programs are really dominated by the head coach. But, Chip Kelly's an interesting guy. I mean, he gave up the head coaching job at UCLA. He didn't get fired there. He gave it up because he wanted nothing to do with NILs and the transfer portal. So he goes and works for Ryan Day for a year. They win the national championship. All of a sudden, he's a hot name in the NFL again. He gets a job in Las Vegas. It didn't work out. I think the NFL is more prestigious than coaching in college. And there's more money for the coaches.
Before we let you go, one of the most fascinating things about you is you are one of the people that gets a vote in the Hall of Fame. I want to know, because that's a first on this podcast. I don't know if we're ever going to have one of the 50 ever again. So this is just a thrill where we're going now. How does that happen? Is that because of your lifetime achievement in the game and your commitment to the NFL and all of that? That's the first question. Tell the viewers what that's all about to be on the committee.
Well, I actually waited a long time to get onto the committee because, once I moved back to New York and had really established myself in the business, I was in Dallas for 8 years and moved back to New York in '89. The way it works is a voter who represents the Jets, a voter who represents the Giants, and all the other 30 teams has one voter representing each team. No affiliation with the team. It just means if a player from that team is a candidate, then when we have our meeting in January, that voter presents his case. It doesn't mean he's endorsing him necessarily. He's just stating his accomplishments. So I didn't get on the committee till about 2010 because the guys that were representing the Jets and Giants had those positions for a very long time. There are some at-large voters that for one reason or another, either people stayed in those positions a long time or they had some requirements they needed to fill as far as geographically. There were too many people from the East Coast. They wanted to get more people from the West Coast. So they used the at-large positions to fill those. But what it means, it's a tremendous amount of responsibility. And it is somewhat prestigious to be one of 50. In baseball, if you're a member of the Baseball Writers Association for a certain period of time, you automatically get a vote. Where in football, there's only 50 of us. And so to have one of the 50 votes, I don't take it for granted. I don't take it lightly. I know it's a lot of responsibility. They're always telling us, the impact it has on the candidates' lives and what it means it's a life-changing experience to get into the Hall of Fame because it's so hard. So, it's a process. During the course of the year, we take several votes to narrow the list down. And it's down to 3 seniors, a coach, and a contributor. And those are separate committees. I was on the senior committee for about 5 years, and they rotate that around. So now we have 5 candidates from there, and we're in the process as the group of 50 narrowing the modern era list. We voted from 50 to 25, and now we're voting it from 25 to 15. And when we get to the group of 15, we'll hear their cases when we meet sometime in January.
This just fascinates me. So are you allowed to throw a name out there in the bucket as far as a candidate you'd like to see inducted? How does that work? Or is that where do the candidates' names actually come from? Is it the people like yourself that we're doing like a group email and let's just throw 10 guys that come to your mind?
No, I mean, I'll just say, initially there's like 150 names on the list. And as a voter, I can add any name I want. I think they allow fans to throw names out there, and I don't know if they automatically go on if a fan does it or they consider it and decide whether to put the name on or not. So it's not hard necessarily to be on the initial list. It's what comes after that makes it hard. They have a blue ribbon committee the last couple of years that gets from 150 down to 50. And when it gets to 50, they give it to the board of selectors. So the 50 selectors then get to vote the 50 candidates, and then we vote it down from 50 to 25, 25 to 15, and the 15 go to our meeting. They're not physically there. Their names go to the meeting, and we voted from 15 to 10, then 10 to 7, and then 7, you're allowed to pick 5, and whoever gets 80% of the vote gets in. Now, that rule changed last year. It used to be 15 to 10, 10 to 5, and then you vote on the 5 individually, and whoever got 80% got in, so all 5 can get in. What they changed this year, we vote down to 7, and then you vote for 5, so the 7 are competing against each other to get a vote, and mathematically, no more than 5 can get 80%. But last year, only 3 got 80% because they kind of eliminated each other because the vote was split. So we only had 3 modern era candidates that got in last year, and it's usually 5. So they're making it much harder for to get selected. And I kind of have mixed feelings about that you get so far in the process, and it is hard to get that deep into the process. I don't like the idea that we had 7 finalists and only 3 got in. I would have liked to see, 4 or 5 get in. It's unlike baseball. I mean, there's twice as many players on a roster in football than there are in baseball. And so, naturally there's going to be a lot more candidates. But, on the other hand, this should be really hard to get into. I mean, this is the elite of the elite. So they changed the voting rules somewhat, and it's harder to get in now than it's ever been.
All right. Can I give you a couple that I
Sure.
I've been thinking about this ever since we penned a date to do this. So my number one, I don't want this to be sound like a total geek and go, oh, why is he not in? Why is he not in? Bear you with stats. This is just from my heart. My number one is Julian Edelman. I think he's a Hall of Famer. I just do. I think that he caught a lot of balls in traffic. He's part of quite a few championships. Per our conversation about Brady and Belichick, he is a 1A in the story of the dynasty. To me, he is very valid. Now, for whatever reason, there seems to be a black mark against slot receivers. So he's not
eligible yet.
Okay. Do you think he gets in or no?
I think that'll be an interesting argument. What was his last year? 2020, I think, was his last year, I believe. So you have to sit out 5 years. This would be his 5th year, if I'm correct about the last year. So he'll be eligible next year. I think he'll get some support for sure. But I don't necessarily agree with you that he was the 1A out of that. I mean, Gronk was, and he was only there for the second half of it. Gronk was.
I know. Yeah, he's Gronk undeniably is the 1A. No question. Gronk's the 1A, but I'm thinking about it as from the receiver perspective. And I do think that, Gary, there is this weirdness about slot receivers. And I'm not saying Wes Welker's a Hall of Famer or Nat Moore is a Hall of Fame, but those guys affected games. They did. Those are, I think of that one loss that the 85 Bears had, and the ball got started with it slant from Nat Moore over the middle in Miami on that fateful Monday night against Chicago. Mm-hmm. And that was a big part of the script from Shula to beat Chicago. It's
a relatively new phenomenon that teams are playing with 3 wide receivers as their base offense. So I wouldn't say there's, a prejudice against slot receivers, because I don't think we've been able to really consider a true slot receiver on his own merits as a slot receiver. It's obviously going to change now because every team has a slot receiver. Every team plays 5 defensive backs now.
Right.
So, the game is changing.
And the only other one that, because I think you guys do such a superb job, and I think it's so much better than, as you alluded to, the Major League Baseball, where you're letting guys in like Harold Baines on his 18th vote. I mean, come on, talk about watering something down. I mean, again, I grew up a White Sox fan. Give me a break. Go ask a White Sox fan if they think Harold Baines should be in the Hall of Fame. Go ask a Cubs fan if they think Ron Santos should be in. I mean, you're talking after so many votes, doesn't that diminish the quality of your candidacy? I think it does. So in the NFL, there's, when Marv Levy walks in as a coach, it's reputable. He's earned it. There's guys like that. When Barry Sanders walks in, these are no doubters. So the second guy that I would say similarly on that 1A theory, they don't get any of the credit. This guy's more than likely not going to get in, is John Taylor. I think he's a big story of the San Francisco era, the forgotten man because of Rice, because of Montana. But I could flip that argument around and say there's no Montana, there's no Rice without John Taylor, because he took a lot of traffic to his side of the field and he had great hands. And I don't know if I'm crazy, but I don't know if it's Hall of Fame worthy, but it surely would be if it was baseball. John Taylor would be in the Hall of Fame, but he's one of those guys. John Jefferson crossed my mind with San Diego back in the day. I know not everybody.
John Jefferson would be in the Hall of Fame if he didn't force his way out of San Diego to Green Bay. He was playing in a wide open offense in San Diego, putting up tremendous numbers, and he went to a mediocre Green Bay team where he didn't put up those kind of numbers. So he might have cost himself. And it's all because of money. These guys, same thing happened with Eric Dickerson. He wound up making the Hall of Fame, obviously. But I think Eric Dickerson would have been the all-time leading rusher if he didn't get so upset about his contract in his fourth year with the Rams. He's playing for John Robinson, the greatest coach ever for running backs, John Robinson. And he gets traded to Indianapolis. He went back to his old college coach in Ron Meyer, but the Colts weren't nearly as good as the Rams. And so I think Eric cost himself a lot of yards by doing that.
So it seems like you like John Jefferson more than John Taylor for that kind of.
No, I'm not saying that. I just know how good John Jefferson was, and he was the best receiver. And Taylor was always the number two guy to Rice. And, the best team the 49ers had was in 1984, in my opinion, and that was before Jerry Rice and John Taylor. It was, Dwight Clark, and I'm not sure who the second receiver was. I don't remember. It was Freddie Solomon was still there, maybe. But, Montana won before Jerry Rice. Roger Craig was probably the best offensive player on that 84 49ers team, and he's the senior, one of the three senior finalists this year. So we'll see if he gets in.
It's so interesting. It is so interesting. Gary, we thank you so much for coming and taking it to the streets. This was an honor.
Well, thanks for having me on, Andy. I enjoyed the conversation.
Stay tuned for Mike and I's picks. We'll be right back.
This episode of Taking It to the Streets is brought to you by Wrightwood Medical, the leader in used and refurbished medical equipment. Wrightwood specializes in ultrasound equipment, but can also be your vendor of choice when sourcing lower-cost alternatives for your operating room suites, scanning the entire medical spectrum. From single physician offices to larger hospitals, Wrightwood is the lower-cost solution for your everyday medical equipment needs, and all of Wrightwood's equipment comes with warranty. You can reach Wrightwood directly at www.wrightwoodmedical.com. That is with a W, WRIGHTWOOD medical, or 773-848-7100. Again, 773-848-7100. If it's used medical equipment, it's Wrightwood Medical.
Welcome back to Taking It to the Streets. It's Andy Goldman now with Mike McLaughlin. Thank you, Gary Myers. Enjoyed that time with you. We covered a lot of ground. It's incredible, Mike. A scholar of sorts on Brady specifically, when I think of Gary Myers and I think of his body of work, to write the book about Brady versus Manning as his first book. He says it's not a sequel, but boy, it sure seems like a sequel to come back 10 years later and write a New York Times bestseller now that came out in September, Brady versus Belichick, the Dynasty Debate. Where do you fall in that, Mike, when you think about which, because I've thought about it since, as I was talking to Gary, I want to get your take on Gary's thesis is obviously it was one or the other. And where do you fall if you have to give one more the credit of the other?
I don't. I think it's I mean, it's going to sound like sort of a cowardly answer, but I don't think you can separate the two because Bill Belichick would have been successful without Tom Brady. I think Tom Brady would eventually have been successful without Bill Belichick. I don't think either one of them would have reached the heights that they did without each other. If you look at the early Super Bowls, all the credit in the world should go to Belichick and not Brady.
That's what Gary said. Those were won on the defensive front.
And if you look at the one that against the Rams, where I think it was 18-3.
Yes, that's a Belichick win.
Yeah, I mean, so they each brought something different. I think people look back on Brady's time in Tampa and think, oh, he was amazing the entire time. He got off to a rough start. I mean, they were battling to get into the playoffs, just like they are now. They were no different, and they got hot and got confident, and quite frankly, almost lost to the Commanders and against a backup quarterback. That was the toughest and closest game we played. Everybody else, we kind of kicked their butts, but Brady gets the sort of advantage because he has all of Belichick's knowledge in a younger body. You know what I mean? So he and a lot of the things that Brady knows comes from the coaching that he got from Belichick. So I always think it's unfair. And Belichick's not doing great now, and it's easy to pile on, but you can't take anything away from the guy as a pro coach. If you were starting a franchise and had him as a young guy, he would be in consideration with Parcells and Reed, and I think I'd still maybe Shula, but I'd still probably take Belichick over all those guys just because of the sustained success that they had. I mean, he was wearing two hats. He was general manager and coach. And I just think it's kind of unfair to try and give one credit or the other because I think they both were individually great, but were even better together.
And that takes me to where what I was thinking about, I should have talked about it more with Gary directly, is there's the third facet of that suggestion about who it was, Brady or Belichick. And it was the third part, which is the infamous Patriot way, which encompasses the entire culture of it all. And it takes in the fact that they've got a 7-time, I don't know the guy's name off the top of my head, but that 8-time Pro Bowler on special teams. There was Gostowski. There was Vinatieri. There's a history of a culture at all facets of the game that's great, leading up to the front office, which is phenomenal. They deserve a part in this as well. So there is the Patriot way that should get a little bit of acknowledgement with those two superstars. I sided with Brady, but I do understand the argument for Belichick. I guess my brain only starts when he threw for 50 touchdowns, and that kind of springboarded the Brady dominant, oh my God, era. But there was life before the 50 touchdown season. I understand that as well.
Yes, and going back to the Patriot way, one of the guys who Belichick gives tons of credit for is a guy named Ernie Adams, who is like he was the guy doing all the spying and you can't be that successful that long without bending some rules. I mean, if it was my organization and we were at this sustained level of excellence, I don't care how they did it. I want to win that way. I mean, that Belichick knew the rules inside and out, and he knew how to take advantage of them. And I just think his place in history is being pushed down because of Brady's post-season and being post-Patriot success. And I don't think it's fair to him because Brady became Brady because of Belichick. And Belichick became Belichick because of Brady 100% of the reason because Brady took less money. He knew rings were more important for your legacy than money. He's not Kirk Cousins, you know what I mean? I mean, Kirk Cousins has had one of the most profitable careers. It helped to have a supermodel for a wife who made more money than you, but he knew that if I can win 7, I'm immortal. And he is. He he's first name that goes on Mount Rushmore just based on the number of rings he's got.
Yeah, no question about it. The other thing that I want to get your take on before we move on, Mike, is Gary is one of the 50 voters for the Hall of Fame. At the end, we discussed, who would I have if I could get a vote for a guy that's not in the Hall of Fame, and I wasn't going to nerd him out with a million different statistics and go, wear my fantasy football hat. I gave him one from the heart. This is a guy that I truly think, and it kind of goes in the tradition of New England. I'd like to see Julian Edelman in the Hall of Fame. I think he's a Hall of Famer. So Gary was a little, iffy on that one. Could see it either way. It wasn't a yes or a no. Where do you fall in Edelman, and who would be a guy? And I also gave two others that came to my mind. One would be John Taylor, and the other would be John Jefferson. He was way bigger on John Jefferson.
Yeah, and with as far as Edelman goes, I mean, it's funny, the receivers statistics, like my favorite receiver growing up as a kid was Art Monk. I mean, I told people my nickname was Art. It wasn't. I just told people that because I liked Art Monk that much. I mean, he was my favorite player. I loved the smart, loved the fun bunch.
Yeah.
And he got in, but he would never get in now based on his statistics. And the game has gotten so pass heavy that I think you're going to see less and less running backs get in because the running back numbers don't compare anything like they used to like what Emmitt Smith and Barry Sanders, and Barry Sanders isn't even in Emmitt Smith's class as far as statistics. I'm not
Curtis Martin, Walter Payton, different.
Yeah, those guys, but maybe you get Derrick Henry in the next couple of years, and then there's going to be a lull. And so that would be, with Edelman, I don't know his statistics enough. I know he had a huge impact on the game, whether it be special teams, whether it be making huge catches in Super Bowls.
Not afraid to throw the ball. Not afraid to throw the ball either.
Yeah. And that's got to count for something. But I mean, at some point, Patriot backlash. And, it always helps to be in a big market like New England. I always think the Hall of Fame has too many guys from the Jets, the Giants, the big name Chicago, those teams, and I'm not knocking them, but a lot of the smaller teams get taken advantage of. You got to have an amazing run. Like the Bucs have a bunch of guys, but it's all from one team, one era. And they had Leroy Selman, but there's a disproportionate number of, big city, big market teams that I always.
If I had a vote, I'm between two guys, and I'd love to let them both in. Gary walked me through the process very, very in depth in our interview here. First off, Edelman's not eligible yet. I think he said his last season was 20, so he's not eligible as of yet. He might get in, but I'll give you a guy. And I love this guy too. I hate to make it either or, but Steve Smith. And that goes to your point about a guy that played in a smaller market and was great, was a dominant receiver, a total tough guy, one of the toughest guys ever to play the game, Steve Smith. And I don't know if it had to come down to it. I guess maybe I'd go with Steve Smith. I mean, where do you vote if it has to? Do you have a guy, Mike, that you'd like to see get in that's from that era, not eligible yet kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, and I hadn't really thought about it, and
Where do you fall with Steve Smith or
I don't want to say anything publicly bad about Steve Smith because I don't want him knowing who I am or coming after him. I just never liked either. I've never liked the guy, but he was a hell of a receiver. He came out of Utah, just built like a
total tough guy, like a real tough guy.
Yeah, he was not somebody you wanted to mess with. Nobody should not have been as dominant of a receiver at that size as he was. And, every time he played against Tampa, it was a problem. I mean, you were not going to shut him down, and he wasn't going to be intimidated by, even when we had great defenses, he was not intimidated by us. So, but if I had to pick, I just personally don't care for him. He just seems like kind of an ass, but that's not the qualification for whether somebody gets in or not. So like I said, I probably said too much. I'm on a hit list now, and I don't want to be on Steve Smith.
No, you're fine. Is Edelman a Hall of Famer to you?
I'd have to see what the numbers are, and I hadn't looked. And there are gonna be guys that have crazy numbers, but where you say, were they one of the three best guys at their position at the time? And I don't know that you could ever say that. I mean, it's sort of um, the corollary to when we were talking about who do you say is a two-time Pro Bowler from the Bears? It was an alternate Pro Bowler,
Trubisky.
Trubisky. So Trubisky is. I like to think that if you're one of the top three, so all pros are what matter more than anything. And I don't know how many all pros Edelman would get, because I think people just are conditioned to believe because he's a wide receiver, he's a system guy. He was a hell of a lot more than that. And, but he was Brady's number one when Gronk wasn't available, and so, and he came up big in the biggest time. So I'd lean towards letting him in, but I don't know. He may be in the Hall of Very Good and not necessarily the Hall of Fame, which a lot of guys are, which isn't a critique. I mean, it's just it should be the most elite guys. And it should, if you're a 3 or 4 time Pro Bowler, then that means more to me than anything, because that's your peers voting on you. And it's an indication of where you stand out in the class at the time.
Yeah. All right, Mike, you are having one heck of a year right now on Taking It to the Streets. I mean, you are 60% and you got scumbagged big time to not go 61% with Pete Carroll electing to kick a meaningless. Folks, we all understand that scoring points, you can get bad beats. There's the Rankins running the ball in for Houston at the gun. There's the bit with Philadelphia running a kick in. We all understand, we're all big boys in the row. What we object to as a group, and I speak for Mike on, is when a coach elects to kick a field goal at the gun, okay, down 10. There's no reason, there's no onside that's going to be in play here. He didn't do it to cover. I think he did it just to be a jerk, which is why he's run his welcome out other places. And Vegas ends up losing by 7 and covering the game. So there's Mike's one loss for last week. I don't know, Mike. I know you're pissed about that one.
It's taken me till about 20 minutes ago to calm down.
I know.
I was still angry about it because I was like, it was such a ridiculous play. And
if there is time to convert the onside, that's a totally different argument. There is no time. He was simply doing it to put points on the board.
I have no argument whatsoever. If they had scored a touchdown on a Hail Mary with 4
that's
seconds,
fine.
That's a bad beat. The ball didn't bounce my way. Go. I get that. Kicking a field goal with 4 seconds left in the game when you can't possibly get an onside kick is like something you'd see in a college situation where the boosters want to cover. It probably speaks to how big of how poorly viewed and how much people dislike Sean Payton that they did that. I mean, I could see that being the reason why it happened. And, and of course, Sean Payton would be involved in it as well as Pete Carroll, two of the coaches I don't like. And, Carroll's a 9/11 truther and, Payton's just an ass. But I watched the game and I was like, I even was kind of saying, wow, I went 3-0 this week. That's amazing. And of course, don't count your chickens before they hatch, which I did. And it's on me.
Go ahead. Lead us off, Mike. Give me your first play.
So I'm back to not liking the picks,
So before we start, folks, Mike, as we go into this week, and this is the 14th week, or is this the 15th week? It is the 15th week. So Mike is 25-17, coming off a 2-1. He's 60% for the season, ATS. I went 2-1. I'm 20-21, 49%. So with that said, run with it, Mike. Give me your first pick.
Well, I looked at the board. There's a lot of big numbers, and at this time of year, I'm always afraid of big numbers for 2 reasons. One, even if they seem tempting, I worry about motivation with teams. I know they're pros, but there are guys, once you're eliminated, there are guys that start planning vacations, and the good teams are able to explain to the guys that you still got to put tape on put out good tape, because the coaching staff may not be here next year, and if we're not here, you may not be here, so you better have good tape to show. So I stuck with, and of course I'm going completely against that principle by taking a team who has basically been mathematically eliminated. They're not completely mathematically eliminated, but I took the Bengals plus 2.5 at the Ravens. I don't like what I'm seeing in Baltimore. They played that opening game, looked amazing. It was one of the best games I've seen Lamar play. It's one of the best games I've seen the offense play. They went up and down, and the Bengals defense is so bad, but with Burrow, they're able. I'm not concerned with the Bengals being able to score 20 plus points. I am worried week in and week out about the Ravens being able to score 20 plus points. So I just think that giving me points at home against a team I think can win outright, then I'm going to take the Bengals and prove me wrong, Lamar, but this has not been his year, and he has not looked anything like the MVP caliber player we've seen in the past 2 years.
Normally, I would love Philly after the tough luck loss last night. Great play, Mike, to end that game in the secondary by the Chargers. I mean, that was as big time a play. That made the pick at the end of the Bears game look like child's play by Green Bay. I mean, that's how good that pick was. If you watched the end of that game, YouTube it, that was unbelievable. I think the kid's name's Hart, who tips it in the air to Tony Jefferson on the one, and Tony Jefferson made a good play to bring it in. It was just phenomenal. So normally,
hold on, I want to stop you. You got to give the Bears credit. I understand they didn't win the game, but they fought in that game.
Yeah, I'll give them credit for the fight, but that's about it. I mean, we're not in youth football. I mean,
it is. You went in against a team that is considered to be the class or one of the classes of the NFC.
Yeah.
You went into their house. You got down. You did that, and I will say this: Caleb did not play a particularly good first half. He played a great second half, other than the interception. And he's a second-year player that if he puts some zip on that ball, they're going for two in that situation.
Oh, totally.
And I think Ben Johnson's got a play ready that he's been saving to do, and it wouldn't be something common. I mean, it would be some great play. So I had to say that I kind of gave up on them in the first half, and I thought they showed a ton of resilience. I felt better coming out of that game in a loss with Chicago than I did in them beating Philadelphia, especially when you see what's going on in Philadelphia.
I'll agree with. That I'll agree with. I'm still glass half empty with the Bears.
Don't have to win the Super Bowl to have a successful year.
But Mike, that's why I say we have to. There needs to be a converter like there is in horse racing, where horses that lose come into big races at lower odds than horses that win. Let me say that again. Horses that lose lots of times come in at lower odds against horses that win. Why would that be? Isn't it better to win than lose? No, what horse racing's saying is it's all about the company you keep. Period. End of story. So if a horse wins a race and he raced against nobody, and he has to go up against a horse that finished fifth and went up against 4 Pegasuses, then we like the horse that raced against Pegasus more and finished fifth. So I think that where I'm trying to go with that is the Bears' loss at Green Bay is more impressive than their wins against Vegas and the Giants specifically. And I'll give you that. To me, it was more impressive what they did at Green Bay versus the wins against the Giants and the Raiders in particular. So on some level, but Mike, the truth is the truth. This is a 20% to win the division now, and they are fighting to get into the playoffs. I've been saying it on this show since the get-go. You know that. They're not a lock to be in the playoffs. There's just a weird narrative about them. They're not a lock.
They went from the first seed to the 7th seed, and
Right.
Great.
You're not a lock by any means, but credit earned, credit due. I do. Clearly, they stole Tooney and they stole Monangai. Guy gives them a legit 1-2 punch with Swift, like we've never seen in Chicago. I mean, short of Roland Harper being the change of pace guy with Peyton, and then Matsui being the change of pace guy with Peyton, that town hasn't seen a legit 1-2 since like they've got now with Monangai. Monangai's the real deal. I mean, he runs. He's Pacheco, Mike. This is a hard driving. I love Monangai. That you can get me on.
Well, I want to say one other thing because my brother criticized me when I said that Tooney was probably helping the center because I didn't realize who the center was. The center is Drew Dahlman from Stanford. That's where my nephew played. He played with him. So he doesn't need help calling lines, and he's been a huge upgrade. I mean, yes. They spent the money. They got him from Atlanta, right. And you've seen how Atlanta's offensive line has gone downhill without paying him. So
and KC's has gone down without paying Tooney.
Yep.
So I know the Bears deserve to correct that.
I needed to correct an error. I was being criticized over the weekend for not bringing up that Drew Dahlman is also a key cog in the Bears offensive line.
Understood. So I'm going to roll with Vegas plus 11.5. I'm not doing it because I per se like Vegas plus 11.5, even though I like to take a big dog. I like the way the market is acting towards Las Vegas in this spot versus Philly. Normally, this early money we're doing in the show again at 6 o'clock at night on Tuesday, but I like to watch where the money goes early, Mike, versus late. The sharp guys are lurking in the waters early. And that thing opened up 13, 12.5, and it got bought down hard with Las Vegas on the road. Terrible spot for Las Vegas, having to do that body clock where they're going to play 3 time zones over. Philly coming off the bad loss. You'd figure that the money, again, a square person would make the narrative that Philly's going to want to create vindication off of such a tough loss. And here we go again. They need the game. And the sharp guys are saying, why do they need the game? And they're betting Vegas hard. I'll tag along for the ride, and I'll take Vegas plus 11.5 at Philadelphia.
Yeah, and I can already envision a situation where the Eagles are up 14 with 4 seconds left to go in the game cover because Pete Carroll calls in an inside job and kicks a field goal to cover the spread. And the league doesn't do anything. But what the hell is going on in Phoenix?
And Vegas loses by 11.
Tampa is in a free fall. But what the hell is going on in Philadelphia?
Right.
I mean, it's easy to blame A.J. Brown because he's a diva wide receiver, but I don't know what it is about Jalen Hurts, but he seems like the least popular guy on that team. He's got a weird energy to him where he's a professional. He doesn't care how he does it, but part of being a great quarterback is being a great leader. And all the stories coming out are about how he's hijacking the offense. He won't make throws over the middle. He's only throwing certain ways, and they're limited in their offense. And every conspiracy nut in Philadelphia is like, well, we think the kid from Stanford, Tanner McKee, should be starting, and Hurts is not running because he doesn't want him to get on the field because then the offense will explode. So I just wonder what's going on in Philly because it seems like shades of 2 years ago when they got bounced early in the playoffs.
Mike, I'll tell you one thing. You talked about earlier in the show here is that you're worried about the motivation of some of these teams that are gone. We've seen no proof that there's any lack of motivation. Look at New Orleans marching in as a dome team in the rain at Ray J. They didn't need any motivation to win that game outright against the team that, of course, quote, needed to win the game. Folks, run from the teams that need to win the game. So I will disagree with Mike on that. If you're not playing for a $6, $7, $8 million paycheck, then and let's not go into what plan B is for you as a defensive back for the New Orleans Saints. You're playing for that. And that's enough motivation for me to get up. And those guys definitely, I do think, play for that salary, if nothing else. So that's the deal with the Vegas. They're long gone as far as the playoff conversation is concerned. But you're and you're not playing for pride, you're playing for that paycheck. So it's not, and Gary also questioned, Mike, I don't know where you fall on this. I was trying to get out of him, are we in an era of mediocrity or parody? And he was suggesting, what's the difference between those two words? Is there a difference? Are they synonyms? Where do you fall on that? He's like, I don't know if is there a difference between the two words?
I think we're in a transition between quarterbacks. We've had stable teams for the last 5 years that were, the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens were getting into the postseason every year. So and the Chiefs have been a great team. Even last year when they won a great team, they went like 14-2, or 14-3. I mean, they and got to the Super Bowl for the third year in a row. So I think we're in a transition year, and we've got teams like the Patriots, like Houston, like Denver, that we're waiting to see if they can continue to have success. You know what I mean? So Houston's defense is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, they made Mahomes and Kelsey look like, like the Saints or what we perceived the Raiders to be. I mean, that was an ass kicking and a terrible coaching game by Reed. I mean, going for it on one in that situation when your defense, I think Houston had 2 yards in the third quarter.
Right. No, negative
two.
Negative two.
And why are you I mean, that was hubris, in my opinion. It was, I think, they played, that's the way a scared team plays. That's the way teams used to play against the Chiefs, where we got to score every single series or else we're going to lose. And the Chiefs realized at some point, either we got to score every time. They didn't need to. Their defense was dominant. I mean, I thought it was a malpractice to go for it there in that situation.
And a little footnote, folks, on that ball game, okay, from Vegas, who has the loudest voice at this podcast and always will. That line opened up at 3.5, let's just say, okay? Sporadically and crescendoing at the end, by the time kickoff had occurred, Kansas City had lost 75% of their offensive line. The line went up. It went to 5. It went to 5.5 at some places, okay? You would think that the line would go down. Oh my God, they're not going to be able to run the ball. Okay, what Vegas correctly said, it was the most missed opportunities under the Reed regime. They missed like 6 or 7 opportunities. It's the most ever occurred. From the Butker missed field goal to all the 4th down misses. Vegas had their line completely spot on. Kansas City should have won and covered a 5-point number. I mean, shoulda, woulda, coulda. If you give them half of those opportunities, then yeah, they win and cover it. What Vegas was in love with was Spagnuolo against C.J. Stroud. They were in love with that spot. They thought it had nothing to do with the offensive line and everything to do with Spagnuolo game planning. And he ate them for his lunch. It was like you said, they were minus 2 yards in the third quarter. I think Spags was embarrassed. They scored 10 points the first half. It was a dream matchup for Spagnuolo. Vegas can't control, like you said, the idiocy of Nagy and Reed. And that's the reason.
And I have a feeling that that's Mahomes, and because every quarterback wants to go for it every time because they have absolute belief in themselves. And it's worked out for Mahomes his entire career. And I'm not putting Mahomes down, but in that situation, the coach has to be the adult and say, hey, I understand we've got this, but we got to play the game within the game. And the game within the game at that point said, kick the ball, make them drive the field. You gave it to them inside their 30. You basically put them in the red zone, 11 yards from the red zone. I mean, it was terrible. That was one that I actually thought that, I thought Reed, who has been great as a coach, really got out coached.
I agree. But Mike, these messages that aren't so subtle, I'm paying attention. I hope the viewers are. That game, as well as the Detroit-Dallas game, which was the Thursday night game, 87% of the money was coming in on Dallas. There was even a higher ticket count. Okay? They wouldn't come off the 3. They kept buying more and more Dallas money. You have to pay attention to this, folks. You have to. The Bears were getting 72%, I might think, Mike, of the tickets and probably 60% of the money. I mean, and they wouldn't come off the 6.5. You got to know this. So those are big signals, and they missed on the KC Houston game, but I don't think there's any regrets at Caesars or win, because I think they like their spot with Spagnuolo against CJ Stroud.
Yeah, but I don't think they were wrong about the Bears either. So
no, they weren't moving. They weren't moving off the 6.5.
But the public lost both ways in that way, like where
right.
Bears should have. They convert that touchdown and they're going for 2, so you're covering there.
Of course. All right, give me the second one you got.
I'm going to back with my Los Angeles Rams taking on the Lions. I've got it at 5.5.
Okay.
Dallas, we saw, had to step up in class and didn't pass the class with Detroit. I think the Rams they had that game against Carolina in the pouring rain, and I think they're sort of getting dinged for that. That Arizona game, I mean, Puka Nacua dominated, but they were running the same play over and over, and like the announcer was like, this is like a 7-on-7. They've got to do something to switch this up. This is embarrassing. They're just letting them dump the ball. And so I think that's the great thing about McVay is McVay will run the same play over and over and over if he knows it's working and he knows how to exploit it. And if there's one thing that McVay knows everything about, it's Jared Goff's weaknesses. And so Jared Goff, they're going to limit Gibbs the whole game. Gibbs is not going to beat them. They're going to try to beat him with him, but they're going to do everything in their power to keep Gibbs off the field in a way, not off the field, but out of the play. They're going to game plan around having Goff beat them. And I just think 5.5, if you're giving me a touchdown, under a touchdown to get against the Lions in LA, I do worry Detroit fans will probably travel for this one, but LA Rams fans are different than LA Chargers fans in that they have a larger fan base there because they're not San Diego rejects. So I'm taking the Rams minus 5.5.
All right. Forgive me on this one, Tennessee. You guys know if anybody backs you through thick and through thin, and it is thin as it could be the entire season, I've come on board. I love betting you guys. That's as simple as that. I think you're closer than you think. And I love what the future is going to hold in Tennessee. They're $120 million under the cap. They're going to get the number 1 pick. I'm not sold that Ward is as bad as he looks on the eyes. I watch a lot of Tennessee. They have a weird 1-2 with Spears and Tony Pollard. And it's not as bleak. Simmons on defense, I can make an argument. They're just not as bleak as the record. They're going to get better. I mean, they've got a ton of money, folks. You saw what the Bears were able to do with a ton less than $120 million, okay, against the cap. So with that said, I got to take San Francisco this week, minus the 12.5. I don't like laying double digits. I don't like.
You were torn between your two loves.
Yeah. These are my two loves. Similarly to the Vegas number, I don't like the trepidation. There wasn't trepidation at places that I trust to lay 13. So we get 12.5 here because we're going by the DraftKings number. So if the market would have stayed at 12.5, then more than likely would have been on Tennessee. But there's a bunch of places that have got this thing early at 13. They're not going to let people get in at 12 and a half. So I think it's the right number for some would-be value. There is a big difference between 12 and a half and 13. 13 is a key number. So in order to get in under, it's a lukewarm. You can hear my voice. I don't like turning my back on Tennessee, but Tennessee is in the same bucket as Carolina, where they haven't proven they can string two good efforts together in a row. That was a damn good effort at Cleveland. And you're going to see more of that, Tennessee fans, next year. You're going to get more of that. That was a gutsy effort. They played great. Don't understand the 2-point conversion at the end by Cleveland. That's for a different day, but that's a win. That's a legit win by Tennessee. But I'm going to turn my back against you for a week, and I'll go with Kyle and San Francisco minus 12 and a half.
Yeah, I think that the Titans you're also got them in a spot where they're probably trading a little higher than they
right. And they haven't proven they can. They're so green that they haven't proven they can do it 2 weeks in a row. And I do think this could get ugly because, again, not that San Francisco needs it. They're like a 90% chance, including the wild card, to get in the playoffs. They don't need it. Okay. Maybe they need it on some level if you're going to argue for the division. Of course, that's a dogfight with them and the Rams in Seattle, but they're in for all intents and purposes. This is me fading Tennessee because Tennessee just doesn't string two games together at this part of their story.
The one area where I would be worried is San Francisco's special teams are not good. Yet Tennessee's return game has been excellent this year. It's been a bright spot. That would scare me.
It is scary. Like, do you agree? They're not. They have a ton of gunpowder with that $120 million that they've got to spend. The number one pick on it. Well, they're gonna be better next year.
Got the advantage of the rookie quarterback. The problem I have with Tennessee long term is you got Scrunk, who's the owner, who I don't trust to make a good decision.
Should have kept Vrabel.
Should how he lost a power struggle to anyone is, should tell you what level of incompetence. They don't have a GM in place. They don't have a coach in place. But they could be, if you got the right coach, they could be the bounce back Patriot team.
Mike, they're weird. I gave you the speech at the beginning about Jacksonville. I was right about that. They feel like Jacksonville to me next year if they use the $120 million like the Bears did and bulk up on the offensive line like the Bears did. That's the model. Get another defensive end, and
I agree with
you. I said, Mike, they're over under at the beginning with Cam Ward as their quarterback in his first year was 5.5 this year. So Vegas likes Tennessee. They like them. They're going to love them next year because of what I'm saying. They're going to love them. I mean, like they might have them at like 6.5 next year over under.
Yeah, but right now they're not in the. I think the Giants have the number one overall pick, but it's 6-1. There's no quarterback. There's nobody coming up. So
Vegas doesn't like the Giants. They like Tennessee.
You're getting one of the defensive ends probably from Miami. So yeah, I mark the tape if I'm right on that special team burning you at the end because DK has been special. That kid.
Yeah, no question. All right, so
my last one, and this is breaking my own rules. It's purely a spike pick. Since I can't pick them correctly, I might as well pick them because they're probably going to screw me. Carolina. I'm taking the Panthers at the Saints. It's minus 2.5. It is. Listen, I am nothing.
What a sucker line, though, Mike. Doesn't it scare you?
Doesn't scare me at all because I win either way. The only way I don't win is if Panthers win by 2 or less.
They'll forfeit.
Your forfeit, yeah. But I haven't picked them correctly all year, and I vowed never to pick them again. But the games were so bad this week that I don't think that what I saw in New Orleans in Tampa was necessarily as impressive of a win for the Saints as much as it was. The Bucs are just not a very good team right now, and they're not a very good defense. I mean, the middle of the field is wide open every single play. And the Saints went to it over and over. And I've dog Shuck all year, saying he wasn't, he's afraid of contact. He could move. He was pretty fast. And I think the weather helped him a lot. I mean, it helped It certainly didn't help Baker, who I have to assume is hurt or is just doesn't have it anymore. But I don't think that's the case. I think the injuries have caught up with the Bucs, especially without paying with worse. And then you lost another lineman during the game. So none of it was necessarily conducive to losing that game. You still have to win that game. And I do think the Panthers, I think you can run on the Saints. The Bucs were able to run on the Saints with a bad offensive line. The Panthers, if they've done anything this year, it's run the ball, and they are most successful when they run the ball. And so I say that a bad offensive line that the Bucs have right now is able to run on the Saints. I think a good or a better healthy offensive line with the Panthers and with their hammer going up the middle and just limiting what you asked Bryce Young to do, I'm going to take the Panthers. It will never happen again if I lose. And I will vow on this at this moment, I will never, ever, I won't pick on them. I won't pick against them. They just will no longer be in the league as far as I'm concerned when it comes to picking. But I'm riding them because if they lose, I win because that helps the Bucs. So I'm petty, like I said, if I'm not.
I like it. All right, my last one. Again, this is just in deference to the lines that we're getting. I'm huge on the number, not the team. Mike is different. Mike's theories have worked much better than mine this season. Mike is more inclined to bet a team versus a number. I'm the opposite. So you have to be able to, the people that are watching this, you have to be able to see all these weeks into it. That's the rhyme to the reason. We just come from different places. So Pittsburgh is a very generous -3 against Miami. Mike, you know this about me. I don't advocate for the firing of the coach, especially in the middle of the season. This is such a paper tiger mirage cheap bid that Miami's putting in. This reminds me of Florida in football in the college game and Texas. Two teams that dismiss themselves from contention early on in the first month and then play loose the final 8 weeks of the season, which completely diminishes them. They're playing backyard football, loosey-goosey. The other teams they're playing are playing for potential admission to a tournament, to the playoffs, or a high-ranking bowl game. It makes people like Billy Napier and Steve Sarkisian certifiable bums to me, because the hard part is keeping a team together in that first month. And I give that guy DeBoer a ton of credit. I digress, because they went and got their brains beat in at Florida State, and they were able to circle the wagons and keep it together after that brutal game. So that's just me. I'd make the corollary to McDaniel. McDaniel's team was lost at sea, Mike, in the first 7 weeks. They were gone. They've made this cheap bid, as far as I'm concerned, to come back. I do not like Miami. I'm not taking the bait with Miami. If I'm not taking the bait with the Bears, I'm surely not taking it with Miami. I don't know where you fall on that, but this is an absolute bluff by Miami that they're a playoff team. This is a bluff.
You're taking the Steelers minus it's 3. It's going up to 3.5. So I know you have it at 3. I'm not, but I looked at the CBS.
No, I know. I'm just saying it's at DraftKings. It's at 3. It's crazy. So folks, if you're in a city that has DraftKings, that would be my inclination. Is there's a huge difference between 3 and 3.5. There's a huge difference between 11 and 11.5, and I'm getting the 11.5 with Vegas. There's a massive difference between having to lay 13 with San Francisco versus 12.5. So I do that. Now, Mike, where do you fall on Miami? Do you think are you taking them serious, or do you think they're a bluff?
I don't take them seriously as a playoff team, but I don't take the Steelers seriously as a playoff team. They may get in based on the division they play in, but their defense, if there's one thing Miami has started doing in the last 5 weeks, is limiting what Tua is allowed to do. And where is Pittsburgh most vulnerable is against the running game. And Miami's running game in the last 3 weeks, again, against bad defenses, but this isn't your father's Pittsburgh Steelers. Oh, their defense is the highest paid unit in football and is, I think, the 5th worst. So I'm.
They're a flicker of what Jacksonville's D is.
Oh no, Jacksonville's defense is much better.
Right. They're a liquor event.
Yeah, no. I mean, J.J. Watt is not getting off blocks. They gave up 254 yards rushing the week before, and I, for the life of me, can't understand why the Ravens didn't come out and pound Henry until the second half, and they came back in the game. I mean, I thought it was a poorly called game by Monken, the OC for Baltimore, but I wouldn't. I looked at this game, and to be honest, if I looked at it, I looked at it the other way, because I thought it was 3.5. And then I looked at your text and said it was 3. I just saw that it had moved. I'm not trying to increase your line. I know. They're going in your favor, so you got the best of it as far as the line goes. But I don't like Pittsburgh. I don't trust Aaron Rodgers at this point in his career.
Where do you fall on these coaches, though, with Texas, with Florida, having these coaches that have teams that lay down for the first 5 weeks of the season, then play loose for the 6 weeks after that?
The Alabama getting into the bowl is ridiculous. I don't care what anybody says. Alabama should be embarrassed. Their prestige and their fans. A friend of mine told me this last night. He goes, the way to piss off Alabama fans is to go, you guys are better than that, than to beg to get in at 9-3. You lost to Florida State. You got pounded by Georgia on Saturday. That game wasn't close. So
they also ended a 33-game home winning streak in Athens earlier in the season.
They did, but if you look at the body of work, and I'm not saying, I don't think Notre Dame deserved to be in, but you have as good of an argument that Notre Dame deserves to be in it at 2 losses as you do that Alabama with 3 losses. I don't understand why these conference championship games even exist. They're stupid. They're only there to make money. My younger brother came up with a great idea. He's like, why don't all the teams that are on the bubble play for 2 spots? So Texas plays Miami. Notre Dame plays Alabama, and the winner of those games gets in.
Well, Mike, I've been saying this for years. College has the most perfect system possible and has stood the test of time with March Madness. And they even have taken what you just said into effect, which is having the Tuesday, Wednesday play-in games. And then they have the most perfect tournament you could think of. And then when it comes to football, they have the worst system you could humanly think of. So I'd love to see it. I always tell this to my father-in-law, as close to March Madness as possible.
Yeah,
Don't get mad at James Madison, because James Madison looks like a total misfit having to play Oregon as a 20-point dog. So what? Iona has to play Duke in that March Madness, and we've seen Iona, we've seen Kennesaw State, we've seen DePaul, we've seen a lot of these teams win. Okay, so don't. I hate these fans with they have no chance. You're the same fan that said that Boise had no chance against Oklahoma. Okay, they have a chance. If you watch James Madison, they can score with anybody. They can go up and down the field. So if Oregon chooses to make it a track meet, they're picking the wrong guy to do it with. Okay? Because James Madison's going to score on them. Sorry.
I would say this. Indiana, who is the number 1 seed, their coach came from JMU. He took 20 guys.
Yes, there's your validation.
And they don't have. I don't think they have a single 4 or 5 star on the team. But the only issue I have with making it like the tournament is you'd have to really limit the number of games
on the front end.
And they're never going to give that up. That's the problem. It's a money issue. No matter how exciting the tournament would be, they'll never.
I understand, but Mike, and we'll talk about this at a different time because we're dragging. But the thing is, the front end keeps Savannah State and UConn football and all the NIAs and the Division IIs alive. They need the paycheck. So my thing is at this point, why not just write them a check and let them play each other for their entire schedule? Does Jacksonville State really need to play Mizzou? Well, what are we doing with that game? I mean, they need the money. Missouri doesn't need the leg stretcher. Why have that game? You're having the game because Jacksonville State needs the money. So make Missouri write them a check. I mean, what are we doing here with Missouri versus Jacksonville State? I mean, I'd rather see a longer tournament on the back end where specifically maybe a Missouri gets in. Are we sure Missouri doesn't belong with this crop that's currently in there? Are we sure that's a 4 loss, I believe, Missouri. So you get the point. I think Missouri is a very much a team. I'm not arguing for them or stumping for them. I'm just trying to make the corollary of the argument that if we had a March Madness like system, Missouri's in and they're kind of scary. You put Missouri in a first round game against Indiana, look out. I don't think Indiana's going to roll over that Missouri team. So I think that would be a good view. I don't need to see Savannah State versus Oregon anymore. And I would just assume write them a check.
Yeah, and again, I'll just reiterate: Alabama should be embarrassed to have accepted. They're two.
Who do you like? Who do you like to win it? Who do you like to win that college tournament? Who do you like?
Probably, if I had to, I'll probably say Ohio State because I don't think their road is very hard, and it's hard to beat a team twice, and I don't think there's any great team this year at all.
Georgia's not great.
Georgia, no, Georgia is. Their quarterback scares me, but so does Ohio State's. So I forgot about Georgia. Georgia would probably be, if I had to pick, just because I have a bias against the Big Ten. So, but I do think that Georgia's quarterback is a little. He's a year away.
And if it ended right now, who do you like in the Super Bowl?
I would take I had this the other day. I had a good one. I think it's the Packers and the Broncos, and I think the Packers win.
And I would take San Francisco against Houston, and I think San Francisco wins.
Houston is a good one. All right. Well, I'd have the Bengals minus plus 2.5, the Rams minus 5.5, and the Panthers minus 2.5.
And I am Vegas plus 11.5, San Francisco minus 12.5, Pittsburgh minus 3. Folks, we will see you again next week here on Taking It to the Streets.
Goodbye from St. Pete. And remember, folks, you're only as good as your last trade, so never too high, never too low, till we meet again.